So after using half a gram of 5-MeO malt over a few months, I now feel very confident in saying that this substance has an amazing, huge potential for really genuinely enlightening the world, and it can be so useful for people interested in deep spiritual work in the process of kriya and purification, and it can help us connect back to source, create a yoga, a link, a yoking back to source consciousness itself. So I am a huge fan of 5-MeO malt. I think the world can benefit so much from it. Every person that undergoes this deep process of enlightenment with the substance can, through the butterfly effect, tremendously change the world in subtle but significant ways. But I am now just finishing my first batch that I ordered, and that would be 500 milligrams in total. So it sort of puts you in an interesting position to look back over time, and I can sort of think to myself, how has my perception on a moment by moment daily level changed? Did I just have interesting experiences, or is my consciousness actually different now? And as I was thinking about this question, lots of, over all those experiences, over many hours, a lot of very interesting themes came up, a lot of purification happened, but I found it interesting that there is actually one very distinct theme or aspect of my consciousness that has changed in almost every second of my waking life. And it's not insignificant. I am finding it really beneficial to my spiritual process of going deeper and deeper. So essentially, in a word, it's hard to sort of hit home how important this is to me. But just to start off, what this sort of realization or change in perception is diving into all my emotions as they come up. Because in general society even, men especially, we sort of have this expectation of being, standing tall and strong and kind of being disconnected from our emotions. And men in general are not so connected to their emotions as women. But then even in spiritual circles, the spiritual sort of stereotypes or philosophical stereotypes, there is often this sort of glorification of being stoic, or maybe you can say being zen, or even being unattached from a situation. This is something you'll hear a lot, is to be unattached to life. And, for instance, looking at the stoic word, I'm not an expert actually on the deep philosophical views of stoicism, but sort of this pop culture understanding that a lot of us have is that you're standing back and dissociating with the situation. But I've just found that this is so actually completely backwards to what we want to be doing in spirituality. Because by sort of standing back and being unattached, we are denying the process of life itself, and we are suppressing what is deep down within us. So instead of having this unattached, standing back kind of view of the world, instead any emotion, every emotion that comes up, we dive into it head first. So you can imagine there's an ocean, and whatever emotion comes up, whatever the color the water turns, we dive into that 100%. We don't put our toes in the emotion, we just jump into it and feel it so fully. And that sort of theme has come up during the 5-MeO malt experiences, but it very much has pervaded now sober consciousness for quite a while. And it is so extremely valuable because if we keep suppressing our emotions, it's not like they actually go away. They're just below the level of consciousness. So by allowing them to come up and by fully feeling into them, it gives consciousness a chance to process at a deep level what is happening. And it gives us so much emotional maturity, emotional clarity, and the sort of lightness in the body is very apparent. I think doing this, in the short term, this is sort of a new practice for me. Life definitely becomes more of a roller coaster because when we have an emotion, we don't distract ourselves. But also I'm getting more and more glimpses of this deep nirvana type of state where when there's a positive emotion, it's fantastic. And when there's a negative emotion, we just treat it as being perfectly fine and healthy. We can understand that all human beings have emotions. What we can appreciate in other people as well is that they fully feel their emotions. We don't want to be robots. We want to feel our emotions, but we don't want to be afraid of them and be suffering from them. So as a little example, this can be very extreme or very subtle. If, for instance, you are going through a breakup, let's just say, then the hard thing to do would be sit and just fully feel all those insanely heavy emotions. And there'll be a lot of it. It'll come up and we will want to distract ourselves, and it's fine to distract ourselves. But to deal with and dissolve these really deep issues once and for all, and just to be okay with them coming up so that they're not a problem, that they're just a natural part of being a Homo sapien, then that's how we sort of change these heavy emotions from being a thing of suffering to being a natural flow of life. But on the much more subtle side, I sort of have noticed that there's so many emotions within my body that I've never paid attention to, and they're subtle, but they are really meaningful when you add them all up together. And there's almost so many abstract emotions that I don't think the English language has words to cover all of them. But it can be something really subtle. For instance, Christmas has just passed. Let's say if you give your family member a present and they open it and they like it, but not as much as you thought they would, it's kind of just, usually we just ignore that emotion. But if you fully just feel like there's a little glimpse of an emotion of maybe disappointment, maybe, I don't think there is an English word for that sort of feeling, but you just fully jump into it. It's really, really interesting. If you do this moment by moment, throughout the day, there's so much subtle emotions that can come up in the body. Just for another little example, I'll give two more examples, maybe a positive and a negative one. If you walk out of your room and you see a stain on the floor, what sort of emotion does that bring up in you? Is it subtle flavors of anger or disappointment or disgust, or is it so abstract that there isn't really a word for it? But nevertheless, we can fully jump into that emotion and really, really feel it. But also on the flip side, if we see the sunset, something really nice, what sort of emotion does that bring up into us? Is it a feeling of beauty, of grandeur? Usually we just see it and move on. But if you fully jump into that emotion of beauty, it can sort of help the body access it more regularly. Now, a little sort of nuance to this topic, I think, is when we are feeling all these emotions, especially the negative ones, we want to fully feel them, like I've mentioned a lot now, but we want to act from a place of integrity and from our values. Because obviously, if every time we feel a little bit of anger, we express that through actions and through words, our life is going to fall apart pretty quickly. But if you just get a little bit of skill, I don't think it's too hard to comprehend this. We want to fully feel something, but just act from almost a habit. Hopefully you can establish this, or you've maybe already established this in your life. You have a habit of politeness and acting from your values and from an integrity point of view. So it's almost paradoxically, we can feel so much more anger towards the people in our lives. But because we fully feel it and have so much clarity on it, we can see how we are projecting negativities onto the world. So it becomes more and more apparent that what we see in the outside world as being wrong is actually our mind projecting that out onto the world. But the way that we gain more and more clarity of this, moment by moment, is by fully jumping into all emotions. And What's also interesting, if we keep jumping into every emotion that comes up moment by moment, like I said earlier, it becomes a bit more of a roller coaster life. But that in itself is really insightful, because if you're feeling sort of lonely at one moment in time, and then you feel annoyed the next moment in time, you notice the loneliness has dropped away. And then maybe one moment later, you feel really happy because your housemate brought you home a cupcake, you know? Then you fully jump into that emotion. So this sort of consciousness of going from emotion to emotion, noticing that when one rises, another one falls away, it can help us realize this nature of anicca or impermanence, that everything in life is this flow. And once we access this flow state more and more, the distinction between good emotions and bad emotions drops away to a very large extent. It is sort of all part of the flow of being a human being. And then we can access more and more states of nirvana, even when we're feeling something sort of negative, you know? Because, for instance, I like rock climbing, and the other day I fell down and hit my shin. Even if you're a complete Buddha, if you fall down and hit your shin, that's going to be painful. But the point is to feel that emotion of whatever it is, like this abstract feeling. For me, it's usually a feeling of ow. And I don't want to harm my body. I want my body to be a temple. I want to take care of it. So you just fully feel into that emotion. But because the distinction that this is a bad thing, because it's not bad. Pain is good. It's a feedback mechanism. If you drop this projection that it's bad that I got hurt, then the pain actually becomes another flow of being a human being. And it's possible to have a nirvana bliss consciousness at the same time as feeling pain. So I think that is quite interesting. Now, all of this, if we put it together, it's not to say like this is a nice, easy solution. It's actually a very challenging thing to do personally. It's very challenging moment by moment. And as we go through it, we can definitely I can notice more and more happiness coming up, independent of condition. I've noticed a lot more how I project happiness onto outcomes. Through this process of jumping from emotion to emotion, you can notice that actually you're attaching your emotions to stuff in the outside external world. And when you drop that, it just becomes the happiness that comes up for you is more unconditional of external realities. But that's not to say it won't be challenging, especially when we start, as the wheels start turning, that can be really challenging for us. And there is sort of this understanding that's coming up in me, for myself and for the people around me, that spirituality is like climbing a ladder or a stairwell. It's one step at a time, and we need to be patient with ourselves. If in the moment we are feeling a deep, heavy darkness of meaninglessness in life, we just need to fully jump into that emotion and fully feel it. We don't need to, but that's what I'm suggesting is helpful. And when you're on a substance like 5-MeO malt, it's really interesting because you can feel this deep sense, for instance, of meaninglessness, but at the same time, you can experience this nirvana. And the flow, the emotion of meaninglessness in itself is okay. It's fine. So the sort of takeaway from that is, even for sober reality, especially for sober reality, because that's 99.9% of our life, when we're feeling something heavy, fully jump into it, fully feel it, and just acknowledge that spirituality is one step at a time. By fully feeling this emotion, it will help us sort of get over it, that it becomes no problem. But even then, there's going to be many more emotions that we need to feel and accept fully. Feel it to the tips of our fingertips, to the tips of our cheeks. This needs to happen many times. But that's how we go up the stairwell to heaven, metaphorically speaking. And it actually does not take so much time. I have heard other spiritual teachers talk about this years ago, and now it's really making sense that once we start to get this taste of purification, and I think we can get this taste by fully diving into emotions and fully feeling them with consciousness, you can feel the purification happening moment by moment, and you get these glimpses of utter lightness in the body, where emotions are a richness to life and not a heavy weight to life. So this process is challenging, it is step by step, but this ladder to heaven is not infinite. We will get there, and you can notice as you're going up, things are getting lighter and lighter. So that's sort of the takeaway for yourself, to be patient with your own emotions, take them one step at a time. But then also, all of us, or almost all of us, we have people in our lives. You can say people we have karmic connections with, like family members, friends, loved ones, or people we're in a relationship with. A lot of these people in our lives, maybe everyone, is trying their best in the world. And it's sort of easy to give someone really high level advice, like just meditate every day and do a Kriya Yoga practice. You know, that's easy to give someone advice like that, and it's true that that would be helpful for them. But at the same time, we can help support each other and just acknowledge that if a particular person through the karmic web of life is in front of us and struggling with a certain emotion, some sort of a heaviness, maybe whatever it may be, maybe they're even angry at you, whatever it is, we can sort of just hold their hand if they want to, or just be really patient with them and understand that they are climbing the stairwell to heaven one step at a time. If they are feeling a particular issue in life, that needs the full attention. Don't just skim over what they're feeling or try to distract them or cheer them up. You can do that if you want, but that's not really helping them at a deep level process their emotions. So there's an opportunity in daily life with everyone we interact. Whatever sort of emotion they're feeling, if it's happy or a heavy emotion, we can just sort of accommodate them bubbling up those emotions and fully feeling it. And we can sort of just be strong with each other and encourage each other that this is natural and normal aspect of being a human being. And actually, I think on a deeper level, this is why, if we want to get a bit spiritual here, maybe it's a bit hypothetical, but as human beings, as consciousness is in the form of a human being to feel these emotions and to rise through the emotions, rise through all these complex webs and tapestries of biological human being and ape. Consciousness is rising through that into the dimensions of heaven. That is the spirituality of being a human being. That is actually why we are incarnated as human beings. We are not here to do some divine work and all our emotions are distractions. No. Feeling the emotions is the deep divine work.